Hello again over there. Welcome back to this another live stream on web development guide, and I'm happy to see you back again on this platform. I hope you will get this content useful to your needs. So this particular live stream video is on how to explain in detail how to become a full stack web developer, and this is really going to explain in detail what are all the frameworks, the languages, and the stacks that you need to understand before you say that you want to become a front-end web developer, or you want to become a back-end web developer. So if you have not subscribed to the channel, please do so that you can be able to get the most content. And also, if you have anything that you would want us to discuss one-on-one, maybe you can reach out through the email address, and also through the comment we can get in touch and explain what is difficult on your end. Otherwise, I hope you're going to find this content useful and you're going to enjoy. So without wasting time, let us go straight to the content of this particular video. And also remember, this is a live chat. If you have a question, you can type it in the chat section. I will be able to see them and then answer them, since this is a live chat and I may not be able to maybe hear you when you ask a question. You may not be able to ask a question on the live stream, so you can put your question in form of a comment, or in form of a chat in the chat box. All right, so we are going straight to the content of this video. Sorry about my voice. And we are going to explain the guide on how to become a web developer. It is very important to explain and have a clear roadmap on how to on your career, because there are many development career paths which one can take. You can maybe decide to be a backend developer, or you are maybe passionate about becoming a front-end developer, or maybe you are passionate about becoming a mobile developer, or any software career path that you admire. So it is always advisable that you get to understand all the guide and what is required exactly to become that dev that you aspire to become, because then many people, you will start normally reading and maybe looking for online content which is very much relevant to what they are interested in, and maybe you waste a lot of time reading something that may not help. But if you have a guide on what you want to do, and then it becomes very simple in your career, and that's how you as a software engineer should be able to progress. So in this one particular live stream, we'll be looking at a general web development. When we talk about web development, basically you are developing web applications which can be able to communicate over the internet and access. Maybe you can be able to access your application through your browser or through any other front-end client. So here we are going to start by dividing and understanding these two fundamental concepts when it comes to web development. We have the front-end web developer, and then we have the back-end web developer. What is the key difference between these two developers, or between these two terminologies, or the terms I can say? So a front-end, when you say that you are a front-end developer, or when you are a front-end guy who's developing a front-end, then you are majorly concerned with developing and designing the interactive user interface. So this front-end person is the person who deals with converting the designs into a functional, dynamic, and interactive user interface. So that would be a definition of front-end developer. But in a simple terms, when you say you are a front-end developer, that means that you are simply involved with the technicalities of converting the designs, for example, the screens, when you open your browser and you visit a website, whatever you see at your on your website, on your web browser, that is the front end. You can see you have a lot of screens, the layout, the way buttons are being laid out, the display of the screens, and all the front end related concept, the user interface in general. So you are responsible for designing that. We will normally have in a real world, so we will have a designer which will design that interface in a paper maybe, or design it using some software. So you as a front-end developer, your work is to write the code which will convert that designs into a real interactive and dynamic user interface, where a user can open the web browser and maybe be able to click on some buttons and see some nice interface images and all those layout of the front end, the links and all those user interface related. And then a backend developer if you are a backend developer, then you are directly involved with the backend system. And backend system, I mean, you are involved with the backend processes, how to develop the backend processes, developing the databases which will store the data, and also designing the REST APIs, which will now be able to be consumed by the front-end application. So this is a theoretical definition of the two terms, front-end and back-end. You might be interested in one of them, or maybe you are interested in two of them. Now, in a simple diagrammatic form, you can see that the diagram maybe may explain it better. This is how the architecture in any application which should communicate over the internet should work. So here you can see that at this site we have the web application in your browser. So this would be the task of a front-end guy. A front-end developer is to make sure that they develop a web application which will be able to run on a web browser, or a website, a web app which will be on your browser, which you can be able to access on your browser. The user can be able to access on the browser. And then here at the backend guy, you can see that we have the database. You are responsible for designing and maintaining the database, and then developing the backend application. This is now the web backend application, or the web server, or the backend server, which should be able to communicate with the database. And then after developing this web application, you should develop this web application in such a way that you expose the APIs. So these APIs are what will be called by this front-end application. So a typical example would be, for example, let us say we have a social media application for chatting and logging in. So what will happen is that we will have a front-end application which will normally be used by your users. And here maybe when the user comes, they want to log into that application. So they provide the username and password. When they click on link on login, then they are going to submit this data, the username and the password, over the internet. This is the request to log in. So this request is HTTP request. So this HTTP request will be sent over the internet, and it will hit this API. This API is in your web app server. So this web application will be able to take that data and check against the database and find out if the user exists. If the user exists and the user is authenticated, the username and password are correct, then you are going to get a response. And this response is going to come back again as HTTP response to the client, telling the client that you are authenticated, and now you can be able to access your messages, or maybe access your friends and all that. So this is a typical application. So if you are a backend guy, then you are involved with developing the web application, the exposing the APIs, and communicating to the database. If you are a front-end guy, you are responsible of designing this user interface, buttons, button clicks, and all this, and ensure that you are able to communicate with this backend by sending the request and receiving the response. So we are going to see simply how, in a very short while, how we can send this request. Now this is the internet that is connecting you over the World Wide Web. So that is a typical diagrammatic interaction between the front end and the back end. So having said that, let us go to the next slide where we look at the prerequisite frameworks and languages that you need to understand, so that if you want to become a front-end dev. So if you are aspiring to become a front-end dev, then you need to understand the following frameworks and programming languages as well. So you will at least, I believe that anyone watching this content, at least you have the basics of computers, you have the basics of internet and the web, and you have the basics of DSA, all right, data structures and algorithms. So at least these are the basics you need before even touching any programming or web-related programming thing. Because how are you going to do a web application or website or a web development if you don't understand the concept of internet and World Wide Web? And how do you understand this concept if you don't understand the concept of a computer? All right. So you need to understand, begin roughly by understanding this, and then to become a front-end developer, your first starting point will be to start picking up this language called HTML. This is not a programming language, but rather this is a markup language which is used to define the structure of your web page. So you will start by learning and understanding what HTML is. And then after you understand the basics of HTML, you need to understand this concept of custom style sheet. This is CSS in short. So a custom style sheet is another language which is used to add you need to add some styles, such as the color to your buttons, or you want to add the background color, you want to add some size, and all this kind of style that you can add on your website or your web app. So you will be using a CSS, custom style sheet. And then after that, you will need to understand the JavaScript. A JavaScript is now the programming language which you need in order to enable this interaction, in order to be able to develop a dynamic. When we were looking at the definition of front-end, you should be able to develop a functional, dynamic, and interactive user interface. So to achieve that, then you need this language called JavaScript, so that you can be able to have develop some dynamic pages. And then also this JavaScript, it is the same language that you will be using when you want to send a request over the internet. So it has a framework or a library which you will then use to communicate with your backend application, and you will be able to receive the response using that same language. So you need to understand this language. With these three basic language, HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, you can say that you are good in web development, in front-end web development in particular. But if you want to advance more, then you can also learn TypeScript. A TypeScript is just a JavaScript, but it is a more strict version of JavaScript. So that, for example, in JavaScript, maybe you don't need an example in JavaScript, maybe you don't need to define a variable, to declare a data type for a variable. But with TypeScript, you have to declare the data type of all the variables that you have. And that is why it is called a TypeScript, because it is a more strict way of writing the JavaScript code. All right. So either way it is okay. So after mastering this, you will need to pick up one framework, and these are all the frameworks of JavaScript. You can either go with React or Angular, or you can take Vue. So maybe personally I prefer going with Angular, but you can still use any framework of your desire. A framework basically is a lightweight version of the programming language. For example, these frameworks are all the frameworks of JavaScript, and they help you to reduce some boilerplate code, and they really have some nice libraries which you can use instead of writing plain JavaScript code. All right. And then after you have understood all these programming languages, now it is time to start building the projects. Maybe formulate a project and maybe build maybe a learning management system or a student portal, or maybe you build a simple e-commerce platform, or maybe build a very simple hospital management system. So with this, you can start now building projects. But now when you're building projects, you need to manage your code, because as you develop in your programming career, and then you are going to find that you will have projects with a lot of code, and at times you will have changes in your code, and you need to track your changes. And to be able to do that, then we are going to use another tool called the VCS, the version control system. We have a lot of different types of version control systems outside there. We have the GitHub, the GitLab, and also we have the Bitbucket. You can use any version control system of your choice, but we are also going to look on one of the version control system, which is the GitLab, and we will get to know how do we manage our code in this version control system. So we have the Git. You also need to have this skill so that you will be able to manage your code, and even if you are working on a project as a team, you can be able to coordinate and manage your project in team. If someone makes a change to the code, you are able to see the changes and be able to pull the changes and merge them together. All right. So this is the roadmap in short, which you need to understand if you are interested in becoming a front-end web dev. All right. So moving to the next slide, let us look at the backend. If you are interested in becoming a backend web developer, then we said a backend is a person who is responsible for maintaining databases and also developing the backend application, which is the backend web server. And this backend web server is going to expose the REST APIs, which are then going to be called by the applications, the client, the front-end client applications. So for you to become a backend developer, then you need to decide on one of these languages to pick up. You can either use Node. Node, this is another framework of JavaScript, or you can use PHP programming language, which is also another nice backend development language. Or you can use Python. Python has a framework which is Django, which you can use to develop a backend, or another framework called the Flux. So you can use Python if you know Python, or if you are interested in Python. Or you can use Java programming language with a framework called the Spring Boot, which is a nice one. And we have other options like C# and Rust. But to me, I recommend maybe the first four options. And with me, I do Java and Spring Boot, and this is what we are doing on this channel. On this channel, we have a playlist on Spring Boot from lesson 1 up to the end. If you are interested in that, you can go and watch, so that you can be able to start your backend career with the Java and Spring Boot. All right. And these other languages they are for the front end, as we have seen before in this previous slide. So you can see that this is the front end, and these are the back end stacks, which of course you can choose from one. You can't actually do all of them, but you will basically choose one. Actually, you will not be able to tell me that maybe you will learn all these programming languages, but at least you choose one which is going to be very okay and familiar with you. All right. So if you are interested in becoming a full stack web developer, then you will need to combine the two stacks, so that you are able to understand these three basic front-end languages and one of these back-end language. And that by mastering that, then you would have been a full stack, being able to develop a back-end application and also a front-end application. Another nice option for a back-end is the Nest. And Nest is also another framework of JavaScript, and you can as well use this for backend development. All right. So this is a brief guide to becoming a backend developer. So in summary, again we have this other language, another interaction between the front-end technology and the backend. As we have seen in the previous slide here, this is almost the same. The only difference here, you can see that we are demonstrating how do we make calls, right? So here you can see that at the backend, you have the database, which is going to store all your application data. For example, you're going to store your users, or you are storing your whatever data you want to store here, user profile and images and all that. And then in this database, it can be of any database management system. Maybe you can choose to use MySQL database or Postgre database, or maybe you are using any database, Oracle database, or any database management system of your choice. This would be your database here. And then here we have the REST API. This is now the backend application that you're going to develop. Here, you will be developing this application using one of the backend languages, either using PHP or Python or Java. For me, I use Java to develop this, and this is what we're going to use on this channel. So in this, this is your REST API application, which is the web server. It has all the application and should be able to communicate with the database in order to add the data, or to get the data, or to even update the data or the content in the database. And then this REST API is what you are going to expose on the internet as endpoints. We will see how to create the endpoints. If you don't know about that, you can watch my video on the Spring Boot playlist, and you will learn how to create this a backend application, which should be able to communicate with the database. And then at the front end here, you have now your front end application or web application, or other a website which is running on your front end or in your browser, or maybe on your phone or tablet or whatever device you're using to access our application. So this web app or the web page is being developed using HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. So basically we will use HTML and CSS to define the buttons and the layouts and the color and all the styling stuff using these languages. And then we will use JavaScript in order to add dynamic, to make our web page dynamic, clickable, and to stimulate some events on our application. For example, when a user logs in, a user provides a username and user details. Or maybe when a user registers, let's say, take an example of registration. You provide your username, your registration details, and then you click on a button which is maybe written register. So when you click on that, then you are going to call an API, you are going to call a backend application. So you are going to make a call, and that call you're going to make is you're going to use a JavaScript. And JavaScript has a library called the Ajax, which was the old library used for API calls. But now we have frameworks which you can use, like for example the Angular, which you can use for making the API calls. So you're going to provide a form to the user here, which the user is going to fill and then submit. And that, when submitted, that data is going to be sent over the internet. This is a call to the REST API. And this REST API is nothing but your backend application. So your backend application is going to pick up to receive that data, and then maybe validate if it is correct. And then after that, it is going to add it to the database table, which is called users, for example. And then after that, it is going to send back a response to the client back here, telling the client that, yes, I have received your data, and I have processed your data successfully, and I have added it to the database. And here you're going to get a response, whether the response was okay, or the response was some error, which maybe there was some error on the server, or there was some error in the database, or there was some error while processing your request. And you're going to be notified. Maybe the front-end application will ask the user to repeat the process, or maybe to try maybe later, or maybe something relevant which the user of the application should be able to understand. All right, so this is all about the stacks that you need to understand in order to become a front-end dev, or in becoming a back-end dev, or even maybe in becoming a full-stack web developer. And this is all about this particular video, and I really hope you find the content useful to your needs. And in case you need any personal assistance, you can always reach out me out on my email, which is provided in my address or in my description, and then we will get in touch with you so that maybe can explain one-on-one what are your needs and maybe what you don't understand. Otherwise, I hope the content was useful, and I would wish us to close this session at this particular point. And then when we meet next in the next session, we will first start with the front end. We already have classes, 4 videos on HTML, and when we resume again, we are going to start again on lesson 5 on HTML and continue, and we will finish lastly with JavaScript. And then we will also, on backend, we are using Java and Spring Boot. If you don't understand the Java programming language, you can also watch our playlist from lesson 1 on Java fundamentals, and also the Spring Boot from lesson 1 to the end. We also have a playlist on Python fundamentals, and if you're interested using either with backend using either Python or Java. Otherwise, have a nice time, and see you in the next session which we are going to have. Otherwise, thanks for watching, tuning in and watching this live session, and I'm very glad.